going to read it anyway. If I hear anything, I'll let you know. If you hear anything, you let me know.
I will.
Yeah.
Did you have a pleasant flight back?
Yeah. That was fine.
Good.
I was disappointed in that conference. Not so much the content. I was disappointed in the food.
It was hardly it. They just had that one meal. The rest was just hors d'oeuvres.
So, yeah, I was telling the mayor I was disappointed.
When you came back out, they were all there.
Good evening, folks. We'll call the City Council study session meeting for November 13th to order. And Teresa, will you call?
Deputy Mayor Baggett.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember DeCoursey.
Here.
Councilmember Holman.
Here.
Councilmember Pelosa.
Present.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Excused.
Councilmember Wales.
She said she would be here, but she may be late. Okay, well, I think the first item on the agenda is the community court presentation.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We have a video, and I also brought handouts just in case, because I'm one of those people that likes paper. And so I have my paper copy as well. My name is Donna Tucker. I'm the presiding judge for the King County District Court, and we really appreciate the invitation to come down and talk to you about community court. Tonight with me is Callista Wellbaum. Callista is the District Court Community Court Planner, Therapeutic Court. She oversees our mental health court and our regional veterans court, as well as assisting us in development of community court. And tonight also joining me for moral support, and if you have questions, we have Judge Matt York. Judge York is an elected official. In fact, he was just re-elected last week to serve the Southeast District, and he's currently serving at the Auburn facility, hearing cases on the City of Auburn matter. So thank you for your time. I would just like to start by indicating today that I was at the county council meeting, and the council approved my district court budget to add 2 additional community courts to the one that we already have up and running in Redmond. I have received, not assurances, but at least also a signal that they're prepared if we continue to show the success that we've had in Auburn and other locations to expand us to probably an additional 2 locations. I've told them that I thought realistically that we really needed to have 5 community courts up and running in King County, and there is a lot of support from the county council, and if we find the same support from the various communities, I would expect that we will be able to figure out a way to make it happen. So I did want to share the good news that I will at least be able to expand 2 more courts in 2019. So what is a community court? People ask. The primary thing about community court, it's a problem-solving type of court. We're dealing with criminal cases. These are misdemeanor offenses that we see filed in our municipal courts or by the King County Prosecutor's Office. And typically, the communities that we get involved in make the decisions about what types of cases, how they'll be handled, after a series of meetings with all the various stakeholders involved in the community, because this truly is a community response to the low-level offenses. So when I say community court, it's really important to also understand that the community court is paired with what we call a resource center. And the Resource Center is really, I think, the crux of what makes the community court have the opportunity to succeed and to be a real benefit to the community. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But basically what we do is once we've planned it in a community and we've decided, the community's decided how it's going to look and how it's going to feel, the court gets started. We do not hold court at the regular courthouse. We currently in Redmond, our court is held at the Redmond Library, and the Resource Center is at the library at the same time. And it's very important for us to take it down just a little notch from the standard court where the judge sits up higher. This is really a relationship type court where the judge is able to develop relations with the individuals, meaning you know, I care about you, but I'm going to hold you accountable type of relationship. It's a compassionate accountability relationship that really helps to make this sort of a process successful, because it gives the individual defendants who come in front of the court the opportunity to have some dignity, to feel that this is different than what they've dealt with before. Because a lot of the people we see are the people that cycle oftentimes over and over and over and over again, and that the community is struggling with how to deal with them. So different from other courts, it's a voluntary court, meaning the defendants have to volunteer to participate. The first thing that they have to do is they go through an evaluation process. So we have a tool that we're using that was built by the professors at the Washington State University, and they provided a tool that allows us to assess the individuals to see what their needs are, what are the underlying issues that are causing this individual to come in front of the court. And then in our other court models, the defendant agrees basically to a contract between the prosecuting attorney and his or her attorney, and those needs become issues that the individual must address to be successful at the court. And if the current model that we're using in our other locations is a weekly model, meaning they come to court actually once a week, and they check in with the judge. The other nice part about this is that the service providers who are at the Resource Center also come to the court and report to the court how the defendants are doing in a staffing prior to the court hearings. And so we have the community who are providing the services come to court and report to us how these people are doing. The individual, him or herself, has to come to court every week to report in on what's going on, what problems they're having, how they're doing. It's just a way for us to show them that we're investing time and energy in them and their success, and hoping that they catch on, that the issues that got them here, that we're finally able to connect them to the resources that they need. The wonderful thing about Auburn is that I've already met a number of service providers in Auburn at some of the regional Law, Safety, and Justice Committee meetings, and so I know that you have a robust community down here that I think would support this concept, and that they are actually, I think, interested in being a part of that. So our hope is that we connect the people to the services and the help that they need, that we reduce their recidivism rate. You know, we may slow it down at first. The ultimate goal is to stop it altogether. But it's really to try and connect them in the community. The other part of it is that the community can come to the Resource Center without having a court case, okay? And in Redmond, we have found that probably between 1/2 and 2/3 of everybody who come to the weekly Resource Center do not have a court case. They are coming to look for the resources that are at the Resource Center. And so I'm going to ask Callista to give you a little bit of information about what types of things are at the Resource Center first, and then I'll ask her to talk a little bit about planning process.
Sure. So what we have, I guess one thing I wanted to say is that this model is based off of a model that we saw from the city of Spokane. So last year we took a group of people from the county from different cities. Auburn was one of them, and we went and visited the court in Spokane. And this is the model that they used, and it was amazing to see the service providers working together and the benefit it has to them. They would actually have people who weren't court involved come and visit them so they could get them connected to other services that they need instead of giving them a bus pass to go and get services elsewhere. They literally could just go to the next table and get the services that they need. But the services that are in sort of across the board community courts that we'd be developing are basic services. You have mental health counseling, substance use counseling, access to housing resources, transportation. We in Redmond have the luxury of having DSHS staff there to start benefits for people. We have access to coordinated entry for housing for King County, domestic violence services, education services, and employment services. And we also, because we're serving folk in the community who aren't court involved, we try to have services for families, for children, for whatever is in the community that can benefit the people that would come. We want to have them partnered with us. It's a great problem to have, but in Redmond we've actually run out of space, and so we have people coming on a rotating basis instead of every week because there's too many service providers for the space that we have, which, like I said, it's a horrible, horrible problem to have. So, and then I can talk to you a little bit about the planning process. So, one thing that people continually ask is, how are these courts funded? A couple of years ago, we got $100,000 from the MID, the Mental Illness Drug Dependency dollars, which is the 1/10 of 1% of the sales tax that we have in King County. That goes to fund services for folks with mental health and substance use issues. So we got some money for planning. We also partnered with an entity called the Center for Court Innovation. They're the experts on this. They're out of New York. I got the pleasure of going to New York and seeing the courts that they've started there, and it's pretty powerful to see what they're doing there. So they have been providing us technical assistance through this whole process. We did some demographic analysis of the 5 cities that we have partnerships with in regard to court services. Those are Redmond, Bellevue, Auburn, Burien, and Shoreline. And across the board, we found that the need was consistent and that this model would likely benefit the community. Like I mentioned before, we visited community courts in Spokane last summer, and then we selected Redmond in the fall of last year to be our pilot court based off of some of the work they had already done around a homelessness task force. It wasn't that their need was necessarily more than anyone else, but they were further along in the process as far as stakeholder involvement and the research that they'd done into their community to figure out what was going to be a solution for them, and so it worked out really well. I was hired, and another coordinator was hired to help with this process, and we started.
Well, and I would just, I would just share as well that in terms of the funding, that the city of Redmond came to us and said, you know, Judge Tucker, we really don't want to wait until, 2019. And I'm like, well, I have no funding for security. I have no funding for space. So the first thing we have to do is I have to have space, and it has to be free, okay? Because I can't use the building I'm in, and I have no money within my budget to do that. And I also do not have adequate funding to pay for security, which is unfortunately a state requirement. And individuals come into the courtroom that there has to be a security screening. And so the city of Redmond said, we'll provide it. We'll make sure we've got a good relationship with the library. We're sure that they'll help us do this resource, because we had already started doing some community resource center type stuff at the library. They had started that. It hadn't been real successful, but they had given it a try, and they're like, we can get into the library. We're sure we can work that out. And I'm like, hey, great, that's wonderful. The Redmond Police Department will provide the security screening. We'll make sure that happens. And I'm like, if you do that, I could probably get you started. So that was also why we actually jumped ahead, because I really didn't have adequate funding to get going. And the funding that I just talked to you about is under the same plan, which is the county is providing all of our funding for our staff for court logistics, 100% out of the mid-funding. But we have not budgeted in for police screening or security screening at the courthouse, nor do I have funds for buildings, so I'm looking for free space in every community that we go to. And we're looking for the local police jurisdictions to provide security screening at the courthouse on that day when community court runs.
Yeah, and so far that's been approximately 2 to 3 hours once a week off-site. And you don't have to provide the screening to enter the building, just that whatever room is being used as the courtroom.
As the courtroom. Yeah, we do not screen individuals going into the resource center.
Uh-oh. Oh, what happened? Oh, well, this is just more about what we already talked about in regard to Redmond, that we partnered with the library there, and that's where we have court every week on Wednesdays, which I would invite you all to come if you can. It would be wonderful for you to see it. It's Wednesday afternoons at 1:30. Come on, clicker. It's not wanting to work.
See, that's why I always bring
See?
paper.
I know, right? We're gonna do this, see if that helps. I saw it. No. Okay.
All right, that's all right. They have paper.
Keyboard there as well.
I have the keyboard. Okay. It's like totally
Oh, it's
stuck.
frozen.
Yeah. That's okay, we'll just keep on going.
Oh, here we go.
Oh. Planning process. Oh, so Judge Tucker talked about this a little bit, but when she said that we, as part of the planning process, we brought people together, and I know we're running a little short on time, so I'll be quick. But the main key stakeholders in the communities that we brought together to form these different committees, of course, prosecution, defense, whatever, police department, or law enforcement, and then as part of the planning process, meeting with local service providers, businesses, also religious leaders in the community, really just getting everybody engaged. And this is sort of the process that we did in Redmond. Quickly, we can go through some of the numbers. One thing we didn't talk about as far as the community court aspect is that we're asking people, anybody who signs that court contract that Judge Tucker talked about, they're also doing community service in the community that the crime was committed, so they're giving back to the community that way. But there's just some basic stats for you all. Those 22 graduations, those are this is towards the middle of October, so some of these stats are a little bit outdated.
And we started in April.
But we started the first Wednesday in April. So as you can see, we've had lots of people visit the resource center. We have lots of providers coming. We have community volunteers who help us with keeping the court running and helping staff the resource center, making sure that the people who are coming to court are getting what they need in the resource center, just sort of like literally walking them to the next room so they don't have any excuses for not getting connected. So it's been a pretty wonderful process to see. And we started planning for community court in Burien. We chose Burien as our second location based off of their commitment to find space and security and their stakeholder involvement. All of the main key stakeholders were on the same page from the very beginning. So I've been planning with them since about the spring. We have an estimated start date, 2019. You have the brochure for Redmond in front of you, but the Buriens will be very similar as far as the types of cases that they're taking in, and very similar as far as the disqualifiers too. So just lots of like criminal trespass, low-level thefts, just misdemeanor cases that you'd be seeing in your regular court. And then we do disqualify violent felony convictions in the last 5 years, any pending violent felony charges, and sex offenders. In Burien, their library wasn't set up in a way where it would be conducive to what we needed, but we were able to utilize their community center, which is across the street from the courthouse, so very convenient. And so that's been a really great partnership, and I'm excited to go live in a few months there.
And then our next step is where the third one's gonna be and
Yeah.
how that's gonna happen. And
And budget
Happy to
decision.
answer questions if you have any questions for us.
The slides needs to officially be fixed since the budget decision has been made.
Yeah, today.
Yay. So,
Any questions?
Any questions? Just one from me. What type of low-level incidents are we talking about here?
What we see in Redmond is a lot of thefts from like the local businesses, less than $250, food, alcohol, whatever.
being in a park after it's closed, very low-level drug paraphernalia charges. Trespass, violation of no contact orders on the misdemeanor level. I'm trying to think of what else I see in the calendar.
Yeah. I know that Judge York told me this morning, how many possession of drug paraphernalia cases this
Over
year?
500 so far this year in the city of Auburn alone. 5 years ago, it was at 74.
So,
Opioids
So-
and methamphetamines.
so you could anticipate that it would be those types of cases, I'm guessing, is what this community would want to deal with. You know, the hope is that we can reduce the amount of time that the police have to respond. The hospitals have also been very supportive partners with us
Yeah.
because it's reduced their cost of emergency room visits for people who have overdosed or have hurt themselves otherwise and don't have medical insurance. And that's one of the big benefits that they saw in Spokane. The Spokane model started in downtown Spokane, right outside the big, beautiful city mall. And when they started, the business community was really upset. They're like, don't bring this court into our community. What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And they are now the biggest supporters of community court. In fact, they're such a big supporter that they're actually going, other communities within Spokane started arguing about where the next one was going to come. In the business communities around, you know, the neighborhoods. And so it has shown an impact on the homeless people in downtown Spokane, so much so that the business community really is their biggest supporter right now. And it's really a great thing to see. We've already found one of the local grocery stores in Redmond now brings cupcakes every month to the graduation because they're so excited about the work that's being done and the impact that it's having on the individuals that have, quite frankly, been a little bit of a pain in everybody's side, hanging around in the community. And so that's what this is intended to do, is to connect those individuals to the services, hold them accountable, but also to encourage them to complete. You know, it's, yeah.
I'm sure we'll have a lot of different dialogue here, and here's some more questions. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Sure.
Do you have enough experience yet with your community court that you could do a comparison in terms of recidivism rates?
Our personal model hasn't been running long enough. One of the things that the county definitely wants us to do is to take a look at, to measure what we're doing and how success we have. Callista might be able to, there's a bunch of studies that have been done on community courts, and every model may be a little bit different. You know, I know that the city of Seattle years ago had a community court, and I think everybody, I don't like to be rude, but it was not a big success. And I think the reason for its non-success was that it did not tie directly the resource center to the community service. It was more of a come in, do a few hours community service, and we're done with you. It was more just simply a jail diversion as opposed to trying to do something. And so, Callista, are there studies
There
that
are.
they-
There's
you
one
might refer them to?
particularly out of Red Hook, which is a community in New York and Brooklyn. There's a really great study that I'd be happy to send to a staff person here so you can have it. But it was a long time. Recidivism studies, they usually do over 2 to 5 years. And this study, I think, was actually 7 years. So it was very robust. And it was the Red Hook Community Center, which holds their community court there. It's one of the flagship community courts in the nation. Center for Court Innovation, I told you, they were the ones who gave us the technical assistance. They run that court in New York. But that study has been very very helpful in helping other jurisdictions decide to move in this direction.
Councilmember DeCoursey.
Thank you. So I noticed that you have 30 cases on each calendar, so they basically get just a few minutes before the judge in this. And I like that you use the term participants rather than defenders. That's pretty good. Do they go directly from that few minutes in court to the providers? And are there future court hearings they have to attend to make sure they're on track with this?
Yes. The current model is a weekly model, so each participant is expected. What we currently see happening in Redmond is that oftentimes a participant will come and watch to see if it's something that they want to do, okay? And after they come and watch, they may say, nah, this isn't for me, I don't want to do this, or they go, yeah, I want to give this a try. And so the second time that they come in, if they say, yes, I want to give it a try, we do an evaluation, and then they're told, okay, these are going to be the expectations and responsibilities of you. Is this what you want to do? And if the individual says yes, then the court will accept the agreement between the parties. And then the defendant is expected to come back to court weekly unless he or she is doing well, in which event a judge may, if things are going good and they're making progress, then the judge may allow them to come back in 2 weeks, okay, instead of every week. And so it really is a flexible, moving sort of situation, but the general expectation when they come in is that they'll come in every week. Yeah.
Councilmember Pelosi.
About veterans, how do you handle that?
Well, the veterans would be allowed to participate in this program. We have a veterans court separate from this. In fact, we had our veterans celebration last Thursday with several graduates. And, but because that court is held in downtown Seattle or at the MRJC, it sort of becomes a problem for people further out. We have not involved the VA at these meetings, but Callista knows them all. Because she's the manager of our veterans court, and so if we have a number of veterans and that's a service that we definitely need, I don't see any reason that we wouldn't try and get them involved in this.
Yeah, we haven't had a lot of luck getting the veterans service agencies to come out to Redmond, but they're more committed to come to Berrien, and I imagine that they might be. There's some that are cited in South King County, so if we were able to get up and going down here, we would probably be able to have services specifically for veterans at the resource center.
So you don't have a lack of participants then?
Oh, no. We
No.
do not have a lack of participants. We don't have a lack of service providers or participants, and like I said, it's a good problem to have.
Can you speak a little more on the drug problem?
Yeah, so I think that what's important that I try to remember is that a lot of the people who have been involved in these sorts of crimes have been here for a while, and this doesn't change overnight, that we are about planting seeds and getting people on the right path and getting people connected to good services and services that are going to work for them based off of that initial intake that we did to find out what was going on with them. I think that why it's more successful than traditional court is that there isn't a judge saying, you need to go out and get a chemical dependency assessment and then come back. There's a judge saying, you need to go get a chemical dependency assessment. Here's the person that's going to take you next door. And the person that you need to get a chemical dependency assessment is literally in the room next door to them. So there isn't that time or opportunity for transportation issues or whatever else happens in life. It's right then, it's immediate. And because people are coming back weekly, we can get and intervene early if there are having barriers to that service that it is. And also because those providers are coming and being part of our pre-court meeting, they're letting us know if John went to his assessment that week or if Sally followed through with what she needed to do to get her intake to go to inpatient. So the communication is much more regular, and people have less of a chance to fall through the cracks.
It was kind of alarming that the judge said went from 74 to 500. Man, that's huge.
Yeah. There's a definite epidemic happening in our county, and this is one of the ways that our county is working on helping the people who are going through those specific struggles.
And I'll just be quite frank with you, that I think that the numbers that you see increase in Auburn may be directly related to the decisions made by the King County Prosecutor's Office on not prosecuting low-level felony drug offenses. So while it's a rather large number, it could in fact be the shift in policy decisions by the prosecutor's office on low-level felony drug cases. I can't tell you for sure, but that's just part of my guess.
Any other
Very
questions?
educated guess.
I'm guessing.
Well, thank you, Judge Tucker, Liston, appreciate it.
Our
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Giving us a lot of food for thought here. Next on the agenda, we have a discussion about resolution number 5388.
And although my name is on it, I'm going to defer to my fellow department heads that actually have fee schedule changes that they may want to discuss with you. Our office consolidated all of them, but we don't actually have any fee changes in the legal department.
Okay, ordinance number 6702.
All right, were there any questions on the fee schedule? So Jeff and I are coming up because we have the majority of the changes on there.
So the, every year, resolution comes before council for making adjustments to the fee schedule that would go into effect on January 1st. So the fee schedule covers pretty much all city fees, but I think Ingrid and I have a big chunk of what those fees represent in terms of business operations for the city. And generally speaking, what community development is bringing forward to council is the same 3% annual increase that we've brought forward in prior years. Additionally, there's a handful of fees, 5 or 6 of those, that we presented to council probably about a month ago as part of the cost recovery study. And at that discussion, council thought that it made sense to carry forward a few fee adjustments that get our cost recovery rate from a very low 18, 20, 22% up to a 50% cost recovery. So where you don't see a 3% increase and you see something larger, those relate back to those cost recovery discussions. And then one other one that I would highlight is that business license fee has not been raised in about 12 years, and it's currently an annual fee of $50. We're proposing that fee increase to $100, which whenever we're talking about fees, we always like to talk about where we stand with respect to our surrounding communities. I still think that fee is pretty much in line with what a lot of folks around us do, maybe a few bucks more or a few bucks less, but what's really important is, if you're comparing, is that we don't have a B&O tax or a per employee tax or fee. So even at increasing from $50 to $100, City of Auburn stays dramatically below what a lot of surrounding communities charge.
And for Public Works, very similar. A lot of the changes are just the simple 3% increase for cost of living type increases, with the addition of a couple major changes that we came and talked to the council about. So traffic impact fees, that's all updated per the cross discussion that we had with council. As well as Jeff mentioned the fee recovery process. So we had 2 fees in that we wanted to really modify significantly. One of those was our construction permits, so that we are adjusting those numbers quite a bit more than the 3%, as well as adjusting the structure of that a little bit to do 100% cost recovery. And then on the facility extension agreements, we've adjusted that for a 25% cost recovery for several of the reasons that we talked about previously on the FAC process and the fact that we need to really come back next year and look at a structural change to how that fee is actually applied. Other than that, it's basically the 3%, with the addition that per past discussions with the council for the SDC fees for the utilities, we are actually following the construction cost index for the Seattle area, which unfortunately had a fairly significant increase in 2018 of 7.4% as opposed to the typical 2 or 3% that we've seen for past years. So you'll see that increase in there as well.
Any questions? Councilmember Pelosi.
I just have a comment, and this might be for legal. Some of these increases, when you go from was to is, it's kind of like the numbers are run through. Could you space it, maybe a couple spaces between the old number and the new number? Is that something that?
I think because we do that in track changes, that's the way the software does that. Putting another space in might be hard to do. If it'll help when we bring this back to you, we can also give you a clean copy that just shows you what the new ones are.
Well, but I've had trouble with this for many, many years, where the numbers, the dashes and that run through. And sometimes you really have to analyze what the change is. Just for clarification. Like, I can give you an example, page 38. Some of the lease fees up there, they just run right together. That's what I'm kind of referring to. Like if you, on the Y1 and Z22, see how close they are?
So they're close, Councilmember, but that's, as our city attorney was saying, it's because of the track changes. There isn't the opportunity to put a great deal of space in between them.
I think what we would have to do is we'd have to have somebody go back through and manually insert a space if that can be done, and that might cause some conversion errors when we go to accept the
So
changes.
the software
Yeah.
couldn't be changed?
No, getting word to change it.
Okay.
I despair.
All right, I just
Sorry.
need to comment on it.
Any other questions?
Thank you both.
Now we're looking at ordinance 6702, I believe.
Maybe I'm
Tired. Just tired.
Good name. Hi.
Hello.
Shelley Coleman, Finance Director, City of Auburn. Before you this evening from Finance is the annual property tax levy. Some of you have seen this many times. We do this every year. It's required that we do this in order to receive property tax levy, or property tax. King County manages the property tax levy and the assessment and disperses the funds to the cities or local governments when it comes in. This evening, we have a 1% increase over last year's levy, which amounts to $214,400. We have an estimate on new construction, which would be construction that was added to the tax rolls, and so this will be tax on that new construction, not on any of the existing homes, or businesses, just the new buildings that have been assessed, and that's about almost $262,000. And there's a refund levy of around $32,000 currently, most recent worksheet that I've received from the county. And the total estimated property tax levy is just under $22 million at $21,949,000. This is subject to change daily. We will not have the state assessed value until December, but we have to have this into the county by the 1st of December. So that's why the new construction and the refund levy are estimated, And we tend to estimate a little bit high to ensure that we capture all the new construction as it comes in or refund levies. It may not end up being that, it may be more, it may be less, but there may be changes in this worksheet by when I come to council next week. I'll get the most recent worksheet. And so to ensure that the city gets all the new construction based off of the new construction, we estimate a little high.
You'll come back and revisit us in December?
Yes. Are there, oh, sorry.
Any questions? Thank you, Shelley.
You're welcome.
Item 3C, ordinance number 6704.
Good evening, council members, mayor. I'm Bob Elwell, the sewer utility engineer, and tonight I'm going to discuss some proposed modifications to Auburn City Code 13.20, which governs our sanitary sewer system. As staff uses city code to manage the system, we occasionally come across code that is not quite as precise as we'd like it to be, or not as clear as we want it to be, or we find items that are not specifically addressed in code. And so the changes we're proposing from ordinance 6704 are intended to address a number of these changes, or a number of these situations. So some of these topics are how we treat side sewers within the public right-of-way, how we treat tree roots that interfere with the public sewer system. One specific occasion of requirement that we have related to septic tank abandonment, and responsibility for blockages. That's when a blockage is caused specifically by a discharge from a business, not from a problem in the system itself. And then also permit requirements generally related to when there's work done on a side sewer within the right-of-way. So there's a variety of different things that we're addressing through this proposed change in the code, or various changes in the code. So one area of the code that raises questions is related to the operation and maintenance of side sewers that are located within or portions of side sewers located within the public right-of-way. So the side sewer is the pipe from the house, you can see on the diagram, from the house all the way to the public sewer main. And our code clearly says that the responsibility for the side sewer that's on private property is the property owner's responsibility. And that's pretty clear, and everybody's pretty much on board with that. Also, the public sewer main and manholes are the responsibility of the city, but different jurisdictions vary as far as who is in charge of maintaining the side sewer, portion of the side sewer that's within the right-of-way. So our city code is not expressly clear as saying that we're responsible for that maintenance, but it does imply it through the various ways that side sewers are defined and public and private responsibility are defined. So what we intend to do with this ordinance is some of the language that you see in there is intended to clear it up so that it's clear that the city is responsible for that maintenance, replacement, and repair that if something occurs within the public right-of-way. As far as tree roots go, our existing our existing code states that trees and shrubs, roots from those are not allowed to impact any sewer, public or private sewer. And we're keeping that, but it doesn't specify who is responsible to take action in order to clear those things up. So what the changes for the code related to roots is it makes the property owner, where the shrub or where the tree is located, makes them responsible for that correction of that deficiency if the public sewer is being blocked. It also gives the city, and this is something that we didn't have in there before, it gives the city the option to go in, and if the work is not getting done, to go in and remedy the situation and then bill the responsible party for that afterwards. Several more changes, going through relatively quickly. One is, right now, there's a requirement, if a septic system's abandoned, the property owner, says in code, is required to connect to public sewer within 30 days. There are cases where that doesn't make any sense. If a house is being demolished and the lot is being left vacant, or if it's going to be part of a larger development, we may not need to reconnect within the 30 days that it specifies. So we're proposing to remove that requirement. We're also trying to clarify that the property owner, if there's a discharge into the system, I'm going on to the second bullet here. If there's a discharge into the system that causes a blockage or some other harm to the system, it's the property owner where the substance is being discharged is responsible for that. And then if there's someone else that actually did the discharge, they can work that out with themselves, with each other at that point in time. So right now, the way the code currently states it, it's the discharger is responsible. But that's sometimes difficult to determine if it's a public space, especially, or if it's a tenant. So,
Well, who actually determines that? I guess the responsibility, ultimately.
If the I believe the city engineer is designated in this particular one.
But from a practical standpoint, our maintenance and operations group goes out and does some investigations, and usually are able to determine that way.
Oh, yes. And there are times where if something is found downstream of a lot of homes where we just can't figure that out. There are definitely cases of that. And then another item is clarifying that several years ago, we used to just allow connections to the public sewer system using a side sewer permit, and that was all it was. But that doesn't have any provisions for traffic control or for bonding for contractors if they're doing work within the right-of-way. So we've started, for any work in the right-of-way, we've been using a construction permit in addition to that, and this just clarifies in the code that that's going to be required if they're doing work within the public right-of-way. And then finally, there are several definitions that we just made some corrections or clarifications to in the opening section of the code.
Councilmember Pelosi.
So if a septic tank fails, the homeowner, they can go ahead and get it repaired, correct? The septic, if it's repairable?
If the septic tank fails, yes. For septic systems, or in here, I think we're calling private sewage disposal systems, because that was another unclear, well, okay, I know we made it maybe more complicated, but that was sort of an unclear definition before. Those are regulated by the county health department. And so essentially there's, if that can be just repaired, then that would be allowed to happen. If it's something where they need an entirely new drain field, then there's another level of scrutiny. If sewer is available, they'll have to connect to sewer at that point.
I happen to have 2 septic tanks. Can you believe it? One lower and one upper. I mean, holy cow. And since I've gotten more educated on what happens and what doesn't happen. man, I get those things cleaned out every 5 years. Yeah. So take heed out there. Don't wait too long to get that pumped out.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
I guess just one.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you. Let's see, obstruction of neighbor's private sewer is a private matter, and I'm assuming that they're going to fight over the fence as to who should do this, or
Essentially, yes.
Attorneys or-
That's a case similar to where there's drainage from one property to another. We, as a city, we try not to get involved in the finger pointing as far as that goes. Well, generally, we're involved in something like that when there's a backup, so we can point to facts and provide information, but we don't usually try to dictate who does what in those cases.
Maybe act as a mediator or something.
Sometimes a calm voice is helpful.
Any other questions? Thank you both. We'll talk about item 3D, which is ordinance 6705.
Hello, Jacob Sweeting, city engineer. So ordinance 6705 proposes modifications to City Code Chapter 1264A. And this chapter deals with public improvements that are required with development activities. We came and discussed this last month with council, and we talked about some of the different types of projects that currently would trigger public right-of-way improvements, and we talked about the proposed changes. We're proposing these changes mainly to clarify when these requirements are triggered and what exactly these requirements would be, and also give some flexibility in determining the extent of what those public improvements would, which public improvements will be required. So the intention really is to modify the code and modify the requirements so that smaller projects aren't necessarily overburdened with public improvements, so the correct improvements are scaled with the right size project. And also so that when we had development activities occurring, we aren't left with gaps in our roadway system or our sidewalk system or other adverse impacts to the public. With that, I could go through some of the specific triggers, but they are essentially, as drafted in the ordinance, exactly what we presented at the last study session.
Any questions? Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate it. We'll now talk about ordinance number 6701.
Okay. That's not so good from this distance.
All right, good evening, council members. My name is Alexandria Teague. I am a planner 2 with the Department of Community Development. First, my apologies on your packet. A couple of the maps were printed in black and white. Well, the whole packet, my whole discussion is printed in black and white, including some of my maps, but I'll have them on screen. It's essentially the vicinity map and the ordinance, or the Exhibit 11, the exert zoning map. So you have before you ordinance number 6701. It's concerning the rezone of a parcel owned by the Auburn School District that is located directly south of Pioneer Elementary School. The proposal is to rezone it from P1, to rezone it to P1, Public Use District, from the R7 zoning district, R7 residential zoning district. Details of the proposal are included on page 87 of your packet. On October 17th of this year, the hearing examiner held a public hearing, listened to staff's recommendation, accepted public comment from the Auburn School District in support of the rezone. And then following the public hearing, the hearing examiner issued a determination of approval. And this, the hearing examiner's decision begins on page 93 of your packet. Staff's administrative recommendation to City Council is to introduce and adopt ordinance 6701, approving the Auburn School District rezoning map amendment without conditions as recommended by the hearing examiner. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the proposal.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
I just might add that Mayor Backus and I both attended that school when it was new. And now they're rebuilding.
About, what, 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah.
Just a couple.
We'll look at item F here, ordinance number 6688.
Good evening, Daniel Gauk with the Senior Planner with the Department of Community Development. So the item on your agenda tonight is a follow-up to an item from the October 8th study session where staff presented a new zoning definition that was required by Nexus Youth and Families, formerly Auburn Youth Resources, for a new definition, new zoning code definition that would encompass all of their current and future land uses so that they would have something that they would neatly fit under. So at that presentation on October 8th, the City Council recommended to simply remove the age restrictions that are included in the definition. Based on, staff kind of went with that. There wasn't too much more discussion after that, so staff essentially went under the assumption that City Council wanted to remove the age restriction to not restrict other users in providing homeless services to adults or of any ages. So staff went and looked at that, did some more research on potential modifications to the definition, and looked at some of the other existing uses that are in the city. One of the main ones being Valley Cities, that operates a facility up on the northern part of the city that provides numerous types of services to homeless, including shelter and veteran services, all types of things. Those ones were Valley Cities in particular, that was approved under a previous zoning ordinance, and some other like conditional use permits, so some different types of uses, and they include some group residencies, so residential type uses, and so there's other providers that, there's also current definitions in the code where a homeless provider should be able to fit under in such as the C3 zoning district. So as staff was going through that, we went back and looked at it, which had a little more with Nexus, and they had requested that the definition remain as is, and so staff looked at it to maybe add one word to the definition, a simple way to make a change that shows what type of facility this is directed towards, which would be a youth community support facility would be the new definition, and then the term youth would then be defined inside the text itself, where it talks about families, young families, and certain ages, so that someone who's reading through the zoning code, the list of uses allowed, can come across that, and it's obvious without having to go read the definition that that's directed towards youth or young adults, and then they can go and look into the details. So with that, hopefully, and there's some additional information in the staff memo there, and with that, staff would recommend that City Council makes the minor modification to the definition by adding the term youth in the list, and proceed with adoption of the ordinance at a future date. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Councilmember DeCoursey.
So the provision on page 124 for communal residence, that covers anything other than the youth portion. So we would have the ability to provide those types of services and facilities under community residence. communal residents?
Sure, so they would be included in the overall use. We're saying that a communal residence would not be allowed as a standalone use in the light commercial district. But as included as part of this facility, it would be allowed.
For these types of facilities going forward, other provisions of the code allow us to add these facilities for other than.
Yeah, and the communal residences are typically in residential areas.
Okay, right.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Next one is ordinance 6706.
Council members, on your table is a reprint of that ordinance. A little interesting feature of our Nexus software, which we use to build agendas, is occasionally it goes ahead and adopts in the court and adds all of the things you add and subtract. It takes all of those changes out. So what's in your packet doesn't show you the revisions. So what you've got in on your table now does show the revisions, and I'll walk through them with you. This is a companion piece to the fee schedule resolution. As we were going through and looking at what the correct number for the fee schedules are, our office realized that there are still a couple of provisions in the code that talk about the amount that we will charge for insufficient check fees. If somebody writes us a check and the bank doesn't pay on it, in one place we had a $20 fee, in one place we had a $25 fee. Now, the fee schedule sets a consistent fee for all insufficient checks that come to the city. What this ordinance does is take the references out of the code sections to the specific amounts and just replaces that with C fee schedule. And so the specific amounts that are being changed are on the handout. They're on page 6. Insufficient checks for buying an animal license. On page 8, return checks for service fees for hydrant meter rental. And then the final one is on page 13, which is a reference to the city has some regulations on what landlords can do when they're charging their tenants for utilities. If there's a master meter in the building or in a mobile home park and they split that up among their tenants, there's some restrictions in there. One of those is the amount that the landlord can charge if a tenant gives them a check that doesn't have sufficient funds. So this takes all of those references out for different numbers and just refers everybody to our fee schedule.
Which is subject to change from time to time.
By resolution, by council, yes.
Any questions from council? Thank you, Steve.
Appreciate it.
At this point in the meeting, we will turn the meeting over to the Municipal Services Focus Area Chair, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Deputy Mayor. Next on our agenda is a presentation by Director Faber on the Auburn Avenue Theater.
Thanks. You have a brief PowerPoint in your packet, but we added a couple of slides to it that I'd like to pass out, and I've already given a copy to the clerk. And the mayor has a copy, but I'll give her an update.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's going to take some good eyes.
So we're all familiar with the Auburn Ave Theater, and we have about 3 years to go on the lease, so now is the time for some conversations that will follow up, hopefully towards the end of the first quarter, with some more detailed information based on some feedback today. But as you know, it's going to be about 95 years old in 3 years when we get done with this lease. It began as a carriage house, and From there became a bus depot, and from there became a dinner theater, and from there became vacant for a little while, and the Auburn Ave Theater. So it's had a great life in Auburn, and we know that it has some structural issues as well, but things that the city has triaged along and has made it a super manageable site for the last 10 or 12 years now, and 3 to go on the lease. It's operated and managed by the city. This weekend was a perfect example. There were 2 shows there. On Friday night, where there was the Seattle International Comedy Show that was 250 people, and then the next night was a tribute night, I think it was to Frank Sinatra, and another full house. So that's 500 people, each paying about $20 a ticket, so $10,000 in some revenue, and people coming downtown to enjoy downtown Auburn, which is even going to become more important in the next 3 to 5 years as downtown continues to redevelop. I think we're going to find that maintaining a theater as some method is definitely in the best interest of the city as we want a vibrant downtown. So timing's really perfect for this conversation. So currently, as I was mentioning, it's touring groups, season ticket holders. It's just as important, our teen performances, our youth Auburn Ave kids, and our community players. It's people coming from Auburn in the area to get excited about the arts. And we're doing between 80 and 100 shows every year, so it's busy. And it's kind of the type of busy people say, well, why don't you just use one of the school district facilities? You could never get in there for the type of thing we're doing on a consistent basis in an existing theater. It's just a different show than you're going to see at traditional theater, and regardless of whether we come to the conclusion that this one should be refurbished or improved or start on a new one, I think we want to keep the flavor of what's going on there. It's taken us 10 years to really find a perfect rhythm, and we found that now, a place where you can go for a nice intimate show. Of the 270 or so seats, they're all really good. If you spill a beer, it's not the end of the world. That you have a beer, it's not the end of the world. So it's really hit its home in Auburn. I think people love it. If you go on the Yelp reviews or Google reviews, you're going to see 4.5 to 5 all the time, which is really amazing, because if you go in that building, you're not feeling like you're in a 4.5 or a 5, but it really works for what we're doing. I think there's a lesson to be learned there in whatever the outcome of our conversations are. Is sometimes it doesn't have to be the shiny coin to have value. This coin still has value, but it does need a little bit of a spit shine one way or another. So downtown, we all know where it's located, and I think this is super important. The major downtown housing coming in, active senior retirement communities that are going to be looking for things during the day and the evening to do. A downtown location is really, I think, important. You know, people have talked about, well, maybe the south end of Les Gove Park or whatever. There's space there and there's parking there. I think downtown, what we hear from Oddfellows and from the Hop and Rail Brewery and Go is when you guys have 500 people downtown in 2 nights, they're starting here or they're ending here. Vinifera, the places that we're really starting to partner with, see a value of this and would really notice if it wasn't downtown. So I think this is something that we can all admit is really key to our downtown interests. A couple of assumptions that I've made that in the next 3 months I hope to take a little bit farther, but I've called a few consultants and others regarding what we're sitting on there. You can see the picture of the building. That wall on the alleyway is, I won't say failing, but it's not in great shape. It's going to be a problem in the future. And if you're looking at renovation costs, you're going to be between $200 and $350 a square foot. The Ave Theater is about 7,500 square feet. So you can pretty much estimate that you're going to be in a project of $1 to $2 million, a little more if you go the route of like Go Brewing, where it's down to the studs and you start over. We don't own the building, obviously, and to do that type of renovation would require purchasing of the site to take that type of thing on. Raw land downtown, I talked to Doug Lean and his people, you're talking between $40 and $75 a square foot. So if we looked at either city-owned property or other available property in the downtown, you can turn that $350 or so a square foot to about $450 for a construction project. So if we're looking at a 10,000 square foot theater, 25% bigger than we are now, we're going to be looking at a $4 to $5 million project. So we do have to make decisions relatively early as to which direction we go on that, because we're not going to be able to get outside funds if we don't own our own theater or have a super long lease where we're willing to commit. So a couple of options and opportunities are upcoming, and I'd say my goal is to report back maybe in late March, April, hopefully get a little bit of direction either tonight or in correspondence from you coming up. But I think that the idea of, there's always the option of renegotiating the existing lease, talking to the Douglas family, the owners, about, we've got 3 years, what would it take to extend X number of years while we get all our ducks in a row? I think there's plenty of time to still line those things up. Over the 10 years, there's been over 14,000 people who've been to the theater, so it's obviously valued. It terminates on December 31 of 2021. Seats 250. When we did that study about 7 years ago, it pretty much said that 250 to 300 is kind of the right wheelhouse for what we can get for a ticket. And I think we also find that we get sold out shows, and there's value to having sold out. A lot of the communities have built the 500 to 700 seat theaters, and they sit empty a lot, and you don't really feel like you're somewhere when you're there. And so I think that this size really works. A couple other scenarios: we could purchase the theater, remodel, rebuild on that current site. I think there's some real value to that site. Location to the alleyway, which we're going to be putting some work into next year. We have some funding in the budget to work on the alleyway.
Questions? Councilmember
That's all right.
Pelosi.
It's all
I
right.
apologize, Larry.
Yeah.
I've been out of town for a week, but I heard today through the grapevine that Nelson's has going out of business. So that might be another option, to expand the whole thing.
Yeah, it could be an option. They don't own, that's a lease.
Yeah.
That building is longer than just them, but it definitely could tie into this lobby. One of the things when we did the study 7 years ago was the things that are lacking is a green room for the artists, better restroom facilities, and a better concession area. So not so much the shell of the theater and the stage, it's actually a pretty decent size, but the amenities, that corner could have value for that.
We also talked about the alley there, extending the theater into the alley, so there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
I think that we need engagement downtown. Moving this thing out to another area, we're losing that downtown feel again. So we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the direction that staff, and I'm getting a bunch of nods from council as I'm sitting here on this end, that I think everybody thinks that if you want a vibrant downtown, the arts is a big part of it. And it's already working. Yeah. A couple of other options.
That's it. Thanks, Larry.
So there's also the linkage to the upcoming Arts and Culture Center that we have now raised about $400,000, and we're going to be starting an upstairs renovation on it here real soon on getting the ball rolling. We have some grant money that has to be spent by the first quarter of next year. So there's going to be some small improvements in there too, and the alleyway project that we were speaking of. It could really become a vibrant spot. And it's also potentially possible that if that alleyway right now is a right-of-way, it might be something that if that wall is a real problem, we could vacate the right-of-way and actually expand the theater a little bit through there. But obviously, we don't own the site, so that's a complication. We can dream a lot, but we don't have possession.
Deputy Mayor.
Just a question on option 2, if you will. If I noticed that you mentioned the approximate cost estimate for renovation, but what about the purchase?
Yeah, well, that would obviously have to be negotiated. I can give what after talking to our division, I can give you kind of our ballpark. The building land is based on what Comstock recently sold for. It's probably worth about 50 cents a foot, and the building I think is probably 300,000 in that range. I don't really want to get. It's hard. It'll have to be a negotiated process, so I don't want to throw that out there. But I think that it's important to note that it's been a theater, and I'm not sure if you're the owner what the value is if it's not going to be a theater. It's really important to us. And the Douglas have been nothing but supporters of what we're doing. So that there's no issues there. But I think you're going to be looking at the purchase in the $500,000 to $1 million range. We have about 80,000 times 3 years, 250,000 left on the lease, and how that would play in. If that was the option that we decide to go with after fine-tuning conversations, I think it's important to know that then you could line yourself up for county and state dollars. to help out with the remodel or the construction of a new theater. Under our current situation, we would have to just play it out, which is kind of options. If you went to another site, you would just play this lease out while you got the money together to purchase another one. Or if you went to option 4, a public-private partnership on some other piece of land, you would do the same thing. You'd have to play this lease out while you built another site, because the only way to get state money through Department of Commerce or the arts is going to be by land ownership.
Councilmember DeCoursey.
You mentioned your own 2021 is the end of the lease, and that's going to be coming up pretty quick. Do we have any opportunity or options within the lease to do a purchase before the end of the lease?
It's not in the lease, but I have not heard anything it's not a conversation stopper. We haven't met with them for, I would say, it's probably been a year. And so I don't think there's anything right now that's not on the table or off the table. There's just no table yet. So I think that would be right. Yeah, buy out the lease and then purchase, or whatever this council decides would be a methodology there.
I know you'll do this, but it would be great to have some guesstimate of dollars with the various options, so we know kind of a financial standpoint which would be the choice way to go, or if we choose to spend more dollars because we have that. So doing that sooner rather than later.
I think an update of the previous study would probably be very prudent, because it's been, I'm guessing, 6 years, and they went through, should it be a black box, should it be this? So I think those outcomes are the same, but the cost of construction is completely different, and the building's not getting healthier. It's 90 years old. You don't typically get healthy after 90. So.
Yes, Councilmember Holman.
Mr. Brown. Well, I'm a option blue or option salmon, since they have no numbers.
I didn't want to prioritize them.
I understand. Of us acquiring property in our downtown core and developing it into a theater, using park funds that, quite honestly, we don't have much in the way of parks downtown, and the park could be a community theater, or entering into a public-private partnership with a developer that has downtown land or acquires downtown land, with some sort of condo lease on a theater space opening out onto a downtown park. Because as we develop our residents downtown, we need recreation space downtown. And there will be families eventually moving into our downtown as housing options develop. So to me, acquiring property or a public-private partnership using parks funds for developing is a real opportunity. And then when we move out of the Auburn Avenue Theater as it now exists, then would be the time to negotiate with the owners, who have been good to us, but this is an old building that needs more than just a little TLC and a little paint.
Yeah, I would concur that it'll need a little more than those two things. Yeah. On the yellow, I'll go color. The yellow option, can I get a semblance of? It seems to me that if we were to renegotiate the current lease, it would be for a short term, just to triage this long 15 years again. Or if we go that, I would just say, if we go that route, we're not going to be in the grant finding business, because we've been trying for 5 years to get grants for a building we don't own. So if we were to go with the Douglases on a renegotiate the current lease, I'm assuming it would be for a short term.
Only until such times we could exercise blue or salmon.
So not green?
Probably not.
So not interested in rebuilding on the current site or
I-
remodeling?
I would not be.
Even though we have the Cultural Arts Center right next to it?
Yeah.
I'd be more inclined for green because it's center of downtown.
Any other, yes? I definitely like the public-private partnership because we can gain a lot of momentum in a process like that. And again, other than yellow, I think we really need to review the three different options of the green, the blue, and the salmon, and look at some dollar numbers that we can have some idea of what we're up against before we go to those next steps. But I'd be comfortable with each one of those, but I think the public-private partnership may help us produce the best benefit overall.
If you go with, if we find a partner, you would need a larger parcel than just this. I mean, at 7,500 square feet to 10,000, there wouldn't be much of a benefit to the private, but there are opportunities downtown that could be larger.
Maybe a little bit of a challenge.
Right, there could be larger opportunities downtown. I concur.
Deputy Mayor, did you have anything you wanted?
Well, I know the existing lease puts most of the onus on the city to repair anything that goes wrong in that building. I would hope if we have to renegotiate that lease for any period of time, we would consider some of those changes. But I really favor the option 2 or the green, notwithstanding option 4. The green one would probably be the better one.
And just from my, love to learn more about all three of the green, blue, and
I will update the previous study reflecting more modern numbers, and also work with our property division on getting pretty accurate figures related to. We're at 7,500 square feet. I think we'd have to do 10,000 almost to keep the same shell and to have better human amenities, which is what the public says they really want. So I'd say probably based on 10,000 square foot of construction, going above 300 seats won't help us as far as what we can get for a show, because we can't sell tickets for much more than $20, so you can only bring in such a size of an act. We're not going to get the Rolling Stones Return Tour is not coming to the Auburn Amphitheater, so we don't have to worry about it. So I think we found our wheelhouse there. So I think I'll just base it on what we did before and then come back with some numbers, and hopefully by that time we can have some conversations too with some developers.
Deputy Mayor, and then
Real quick one, I don't think we have any money in our current biennial budget that we have for 2019 and 2020.
For acquisition or? No, there's, the money in the budget is basically the 80,000 annually for lease. So if you did consider that money after the lease available for your debt payment, 80,000 over 20 years gets you probably
So if we do
$1.5
start
million.
something in any of
And then
those,
you'd have to find another $1.5
If we
million.
did start something in any of those out years like that, would either be a budget amendment or.
That's correct.
Or fall into the next biennium.
Yeah.
Councilmember
Well, the first
Holm.
phase would be the capital facilities budget, and what source of funds those would be, such as park impact fees potentially, if that's an eligible thing, and what grants or what other funds are out there.
The venue size is perfect, 250, 300 seats, perfect. That's where the preschool kids have their Christmas pageants, and
Works really
it's a
well.
great venue. If we have a bigger crowd, we have the PAC that works great for larger crowds, but this, particularly located in our downtown, is absolutely perfect. Would not like to lose that opportunity. But the work that the current existing Auburn Ave needs is far beyond the remodel, because it needs more square footage.
Definitely more than a coat of paint.
And then we would, that brings up a problem of what we can use park impact fees for.
Right.
I don't think we can use them in the current Auburn Ave Theater. It'd be a stretch, because it's leased.
Definitely can't use it for that.
So, but if we have new ground that we own or join in a public-private partnership, then we can use park impact fees.
For the land.
For the land and, you know.
Potentially, depending on, we'd have to get a legal opinion on the construction. Yeah.
Sidewalk amenities and such.
Definitely all of those things.
Any more questions or comments about this agenda item? Well, you're still up there, Director?
Not quite as exciting. So exciting I can hardly see what I'm doing here. Which one is it? Right above it?
Yes, number 2.
Yep.
There, you're on it.
Sign everywhere, the sign, locking up the scenery, breaking.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Makes you go to the app.
To read the sign.
Slideshow up there.
If you go down to the right lower bar on the very bottom, move it over to the little movie screen by the
Well, I wish I had my
slider
glasses
bar.
on for this. Can we just go from here? This will work for me. Current slide, right there. It's only 2 slides. So there's park rules and policies. The conversation came up maybe 6 months ago, I'm not really sure. And there's basically 2 types of signs in our Auburn parks, and they're all, they're exactly the same rules and regulations in our parks. Pretty much the only exception is that our parks that have ball field lights have the additional rules on there of the park hours allowed because of ball field lights at those. And so all of our park rules are related to health, safety, and welfare of the park users. They're all covered in Chapter 2.22. And if you were to go under Chapter 2.22 in the city code, you would see quite a few pages, and the attorney could probably tell you how many actual rules there are related to parks. There's a lot of them, and they're the same laws that relate to citizens not in parks in most instances. Whether it's soliciting or whether it's this or that, they're the same rules if you're in a park or not. So the ones that are on our park sign, and they're pretty common in all King County parks, are things that we think are pertinent to our park system, and we don't put the other ones on there. Things like fireworks, overnight use, animals, drug use, noise, things that are actually pertinent to the parks are listed on there. These were all updated in 2013, and the new signs have been added maybe 2 years ago that have been working really well. Things in our rules, it's a Class 1 infraction, a gross misdemeanor, or other misdemeanor or applicable law, and we have a great relationship with our police department, and the bike officers recently have just been so on board with these things. And we've even gotten cute with some of our signs, such as our dog one there, where in signs that we have a lot of issues maybe with one topic. Some of our parks, Les Gove has a lot of off-leash dog walkers, and we try to get on them, and we work with our code enforcement and others, putting the proper signs at the proper parks that are really pertinent instead of just a sign there, because our signs would be as big as a billboard if we put every law on every sign, and nobody would read them as such. So dog code requires you clean up after your dogs and use a leash, and then we also mention it to the dogs. Grr, bark, woof, woof, good dog. So everybody makes it really clear. I always say if the dogs could read the signs, they would take care of these issues. But they can't.
How do you know?
The other type, I don't know, they'd like
They
to.
don't have opposable thumbs.
The other signs that are up in a lot of our parks are basically what I would call policy signs. We have our policy book, which was updated about 2013 to 2015, went through park board page by page by page, and these are all of what I would call the park policies related to reserving a ball field and a picnic shelter, proper, how do you use the community garden, there's a zillion, radio vehicles in parks, all the rules and regulations are in the park policy. Regulations regarding using tennis courts, etc. So they're kind of separate from what I would call the codified rules, but the breaking of these police department can trespass somebody if they're mismanaging one of the policies that are set in place. And so that would be a trespass per city code. And so these signs that you may see in our parks are pretty much only at the places that have that amenity. There's no reason to put tennis court rules in a park that doesn't have tennis courts and the like. So these are the other type of signs that you're going to see in our parks. They're almost all on 2x2 posts or perhaps on the entrance to the park sign. I don't think we have any signs that are on trees or other things like that. Some are on fences like tennis court fences or the off-leash dog area. At Regner has one on the dog park, and so they're in the appropriate places. So those are the other violations, and they're basically all out of the policy manual, which is an extension, but doesn't include the things that are in the city code. And so these items go to park board, and sometimes if it's actual law, it would come to council as a city code. But these are more the guidelines that we use. How far in advance can you rent a picnic shelter? Stuff that's not really the law, but it's the rules. Hope that answers any questions. If I went the wrong direction, let me know. Those are the two books, and they're available.
Yes.
I noticed I was down at Game Farm Park a month or so ago, and there were rules, but it was tacked to a tree. As you enter the canopy area.
Oh, the shelter?
The shelter, yeah.
I saw one really high, but not on a tree at the end where the turnaround is, but I didn't see one. I'll take a look.
Yeah.
We shouldn't, they should be on posts or on a fence.
And the other thing is, what about putting some of these signs in Hispanic? Because like down at Evans Park.
What we have found in these new signs that we use the international symbol on all of the signs, and so we have stuck with that. I think there's probably about 20 languages probably spoke, while the Spanish would be the most, other than English. I think that the international signs, and the other, Isaac Evans is a great example of people taking really good care of a park. So it could be done, but to be twice as many signs, obviously.
Well,
yeah.
I'm just saying.
Or in a specific park, perhaps.
The population of Isaac Evans Park on a weekend in hot weather, when I've driven by there, it could use some Spanish signage.
Yeah, I think what I would do in that is if we notice a regulation that perhaps is not being followed, we could either address it with the way we have our individual signs or talk to whoever the renters are. I don't know if I could consider it, whether you guys can consider it. That park, it's super busy, and we've worked really hard with that group, and they really clean up after themselves.
Yes, Mayor. Something maybe to look at in the future, similar to what we have on the public art pieces. Maybe there is a way for them to use their smartphones and be able to pull up in a bilingual opportunity the park rules.
That's a great idea.
That way we're not sign pollution everywhere, but still have an opportunity.
Well, I know that when we switched to the new signs, the look and the brightness of them really, people started to notice them a little more. And it's the most important thing is it gives the police department a place to point people, hey, here's the regulation. It's still the law, but when you actually have a sign in all of our parks, it really does help with enforcement.
All right, any other questions? Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is a discussion of fireworks season review, and Commander O'Neill, I think, is up for Chief Pearson.
Copy of a handout, yes, go along with this.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty, yeah, it's really nice looking. Thank you, Commander.
That little short packet.
Here you go, Mayor.
Switch to sugar.
and see which one it is.
Right
there.
there.
Right there.
We've got to figure out a better way for people to be able to see this.
Just need an eye exam, I don't know. All right, so we kind of look at the fireworks season at the police department as running from June 1st to July 5th. And so when we looked at the fireworks season for this year, we came up with 3 objectives and 3 things that we wanted to focus on and accomplish. The first one was we wanted to continue to focus on a zero tolerance policy for possession and discharge of fireworks in the city. We wanted to continue our efforts to improve communication and cooperation with the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe. And we wanted to continue with our proactive fireworks patrols. When we looked at staffing for the fireworks season, we broke it down into 2 categories. One was our proactive patrols between June 26th and July 5th, and then the way we were going to staff July 4th to cover patrol, calls for service, traffic enforcement, and then fireworks emphasis. So between June 26th and July 5th, we had 12 officers that worked 78.5 hours for fireworks emphasis dedicated to firework calls. And then on July 4th, we had 23 officers and 3 sergeants that covered our 3 patrol shifts, and they were responsible for 911 calls for service and traffic enforcement. And then we had 4 officers and a sergeant assigned to traffic. That's our typical traffic division in a typical day in traffic. And then we had 6 officers and 1 sergeant that were assigned to the parks. We put a special emphasis on Les Gove Park because it was hit pretty hard in 2017. We also had 19 officers and 2 sergeants assigned to fireworks emphasis, and 6 officers and a sergeant assigned to the discharge area. The total cost for the emphasis in 2018 was $27,005. In 2018, we had 3 major incidents that police and fire responded to. On June 3rd, an 18-year-old male was injured when an M80 detonated in his hand. On July 4th, a 31-year-old male was injured when a mortar detonated in his hand. And then there was a significant brush fire in the discharge area. In 2018, our calls for service on the 4th of July were 154. These are all the calls that came in between 11 o'clock on July 4th and 8 o'clock in the morning on July 5th. This was a decrease from 181 in 2017. Our lowest year over the last 5 years was 2016 at 114 calls. The city is split up into 6 patrol districts, and we had a decrease in 3 of our districts. The 2, 3, and 5 all decreased calls for service. Calls increased in the 1 district by 4 from 2017 to 2018. The 1 district is the West Hill of the city, and I would attribute the increase in calls there to the increased population. It's a lot of new housing developments that have grown over the past year, which I think would increase our calls there. And then the 4 districts stayed the same. When comparing Auburn to the other Valley cities, we had a 15% decrease in calls for service from 2017. Kent had the largest decrease at 35%, and Renton had the largest increase at 31%. When you look at our arrest and reports from June 1st through July 5th, we had a 5-year low on calls for service at 288. This was down from 392 in 2017. Our reports were up by 3 for 7 reports written in 2018, and then we had a 5-year high of 8 arrests.
Do you have any questions?
On this next slide, you'll again just see stat comparisons for the last 5 years, and then calls as they compare from each patrol district between 2017 and 2018. In 2018, we confiscated 309 separate fireworks And the results from our fireworks emphasis this year were on July 4th, the fireworks stands closed around 10:30 p.m. There were no injuries to officers this year. Peak activities for calls were between 9 p.m. and midnight. Our emphasis units secured at 2 o'clock in the morning on July 5th, and there were only 3 calls for service between 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock that patrol officers had to respond to. And unlike 2017, there was minimal debris in the city parks this year. Our plan for 2019 is to do a better job at advertising the city ordinance for fireworks. We're going to do that through social media and a press release. We're going to continue our relationship with the Muckleshoot Indian tribe, and we're going to continue our emphasis in the city parks. Are there any questions I can answer for you?
Yes, Councilman Pelosi.
I recall that several years now, District 2 and 6, they've been the highest. So what can we do to put more emphasis on those 2 districts?
Well, I think traditionally those districts are going to be our busiest because one, the District 6 is where the discharge area is located. And District 2 is the largest and most populated district in the city. And so I think those factors right there, which we don't have much control over, are going to contribute to higher calls for service compared to the other districts in the city.
But my point is, 2 and 6, they've been in the front runners now for many, many years. And how can we reduce that?
Well, like I said, I don't think we're going to be able to reduce the calls for service in the area where the discharge stand is. That's where a majority of the fireworks are being produced and discharged. And I think that that factor right there is outside of our control and our limitations. In the 2 district, with that being the largest and most populated district, we can place extra emphasis cars in that area on the 4th of July next year in that district. But typically what we do is we split the city between north and south.
Yeah, but these numbers are telling us something. And I would think the police would heed those numbers, and like you just said, put some more emphasis. Putting more emphasis, then you're working the problem. But if we don't put more emphasis, we're not working the problem.
Right, I understand that.
I will assure you that our police department is working the process and are incredibly busy during that time. So you can't remove all of your resources from one area to focus on another area. And if you notice in District 2 this year, the call number was down.
Yeah.
So they are working very, very hard. Sometimes, as you've heard the saying go, you can't fix stupid. There are going to be those who will continue to discharge fireworks regardless of where they are.
You know, was the 30-something-year-old that
Yes.
let a mortar go off in his hand?
Right down at the end of my street on the levee.
So, any other questions? Thank you, Commander O'Neill.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will hand the non-existent gavel back to the deputy mayor.
I'm gonna get one of those inflatable ones.
Virtual, yeah.
I still have mine from Dave and Buster's. I can bring
Okay,
them.
well, there you go.
Okay, we will, I don't believe we have any other discussion items or new business. So we'll go right to the matrix, which I think we only have one item there, which is the continuing saga of the identity theft process.
Still working on getting a presentation together for that.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I have an item that I would like to propose for council. In the city, well, in the state of Washington, there is not anything allowed that has any way, shape, or form to do with rent controls. However, there are some concerns that have been arising within our city about the purchasing of some lower income multifamily units and increasing the rents significantly. So one of the things, and Director Tate was sharing it with me, Seattle has established, so Washington state law has a number of controls that tie our hands. Washington state law only requires landlords to provide 30 days of notice for a rent increase. Additionally, it precludes a city from establishing rent control. Seattle established its own law that requires landlords to provide 60 days of notice if a rent increase will exceed 10%. So I just wanted to throw it out there and see if council would be interested in entertaining something like that with the 10% increase of requiring landlords to provide more than a 30-day notice.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
A housing issue, very definitely.
So
Yeah,
I know the chair and the vice chair of that committee are not here this evening, but I just wanted to throw that out there to see if there was any interest in it.
Yeah, I think with all the levies and the tax increases and what have you, and what we're projecting for the next year or two, I think it's probably time that we put this on the agenda and deal with it. Maybe we won't solve all the problems, but...
Yeah, the issue that caused this one to come up was a fourplex newly purchased, so new owners. The rent went from $800 per month to $1,200 per month. All current residents have to re-sign a new lease and come up with new deposits, first and last month's rent. Wow. So there are laws that will require that their deposits that the former owners had do have to transfer over to this new owner, but things like this, we can do better for our community by keeping some of these affordable housing units skyrocketing in
Unusual
price.
burden on those that are least able to
That's a
afford it.
50% increase in rent for that.
So what would be a good terminology for this? You don't want to say, do you want to say rent control?
No, you know you can't say rent control.
Yeah.
Might I suggest for a matrix item, tenant protection measures?
Tenant protection.
That could expand further depending on what Director Tate has in mind. From that notice, there are several other things that other cities do.
What was your suggestion? I didn't hear you.
Tenant protection measures.
Oh, sure.
That sounds great.
I think in one other area, and I haven't really spoken with Jeff about it too much, but there is the inspection program that Tukwila is the only city they were grandfathered in that has the ability to do their own internal inspection of multifamily properties. But Kent has recently enacted their own law that will require an inspection be done by a third party, I believe. Is that right, Jeff?
Yes, that's correct. And there were some recent changes to the RCW on multifamily housing inspections, so new information too.
So perhaps something that, again, council might be interested in having those things on the agenda, upcoming agenda in the new year.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any other additions, potential additions to the matrix? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Excellent. Let's go have dinner.